Today on March 1st, Blue Isle Studios just released their new sci-fi first-person shooter, Leap. This game has been around for a while now in early access, but this is the full launch of both the PC version and also it coming to console for the first time. Now, Blue Isle Studios has also made a bunch of other games that I honestly have never heard of, and so for me, this was the first time that I checked out this developer. Now, the game unfortunately is not free to play. It actually costs $15, which is the first major mistake that I think this game is making. As of today, the day that the game launched, the player base is non-existent. It peaked at 50 players on Steam, so it's basically dead on arrival. And with it being a mostly PvP based game that, as far as I can tell, doesn't have bots, this is probably just a waste of your money if you were to decide to buy it. Now, the game itself isn't horrible. It's not the worst game I've ever played, but it just seems kind of uninspired and not really worth the price. Now, I think the game could get better in the future as it just kind of seems unfinished and unpolished, but today, the day of launch, it's really not something that I would recommend, especially with the price tag. If it was free to play, I would say screw it, why don't you go in and try it? I think being an indie studio and trying to launch a mostly multiplayer game with a price tag is just a death sentence in the first place, but the actual product of Leap isn't doing it any favors. Now, it's a sci-fi class-based FPS. There are 4 classes that each have a unique ability, and all the different classes have specific weapons that they can choose from. Although there isn't really that much variety in the weapons, as at most, some of the characters just have a few choices. The games itself are supposed to be this large and expansive kind of Battlefield-esque mode where you have these 20v20 lobbies with 6 different game modes, and they even have user-created mods and content. However, basically the only thing that you're going to be able to find matches for is control, where you basically just fight over different points on the map and try and, control them. Pretty similar to modes that you would have played in Battlefield. Now, these maps are giant, and while fighting on the specific points can be pretty action-filled, especially when you're in a full server, there is a lot of traversing that you're going to do on the map, and luckily you have the grapple hook and the hoverboard to kind of get around. Now, the hoverboard is nothing special, it's really not good for anything besides traveling around, but the grapple hook gives you some kind of cool movement tech, although for a grapple hook it's pretty uninspired. It basically just goes in a straight line and it's pretty buggy. Now, the matches themselves in Control specifically, as that's literally all I got to play, are extremely long, and I think they could cut the score by literally half if they wanted to. The gameplay itself of the game also feels a little bit off. In my experience, aiming feels very off on mouse and keyboard. I don't know if there's some built-in aim acceleration that you just can't turn off, but for whatever reason, it just didn't feel right hopping on. Now, after a few hours, you do start to get used to it, but I still think something is up there. I also had a friend play on controller, and he said controller feels absolutely terrible, and the default keybinds on controller make no sense. Along with the PvP mode, you also have the PvE wave-based horde-style mode, and this mode just seems like a tack-on that I think they probably should have cut altogether. It has some of the worst AI I've ever seen that basically just run straight at you or sometimes just stand there while you shoot at them. And it's one of those modes where you just go around and do various objectives while it throws a bunch of NPCs at you. It's not very fun in my opinion, and whatever time they spent on the PvE mode probably would have been better spent in the PvP, as at least I think that side of the game has a tiny bit of potential. Along with this, the game just kind of has underwhelming gunplay. It's not overly satisfying, and part of this comes down to the very buggy nature of the game, but also just the animations are very unpolished, and there's a lot of weird things that go on. For example, when you're using the grapple hook, sometimes it shoots out 2 ropes, sometimes it shoots out 1, sometimes you'll grapple hook in the opposite direction that you're trying to go, sometimes you can get stuck clambering on a building, and the list goes on in terms of bugs and weird interactions. Now, the game does have some cool ideas. It's kind of like if you took Battlefield, combined it with Titanfall, and had a movement shooter that was also huge in scale. The idea of that can be pretty cool, and there are slight moments of the game that are fun. But in general, the game just feels unfinished and unpolished, and with the already tiny player base, I think this game's going to be dead by next week. Don't get me wrong, I went in with an open mind and I wanted to like Leap. But as it is today, I would not recommend anyone buy this game, as I think you'd just be flushing your money down the drain. Now, hopefully I'm wrong and Leap makes some weird resurgence, but if I had to guess, this game's probably going to get abandoned here within the next month or so. Maybe it'll go free to play, but I think even that's going to be too late. Anyways, that's the video. I didn't do a live com because honestly, I just didn't want to play more of this game after streaming it for 3 or 4 hours, so that's why we're doing more of this style of video. Maybe I'll do more like this in the future, but that's the video. Check out the memberships on the channel, and I'll see you all next time.